All right, y'all. This is Mountain Tales and River Stories, episode 7. Story 1. Brothers of the Rio. The rat watched the boys on the riverbank. He had seen them before. There were 5 of them, all teenagers, with tackle boxes and fishing poles lined up and leaning against the rusted-out frame of an old car seat that faced the water. Each had a can of pop and was chewing tobacco in the late summer evening at a fishing spot known to the boys as the shithole. The rat was careful to stay out of sight, for he was used to being the target of rocks and curses that would send him scurrying up the bank to the safety of the undergrowth. The shithole was across from the mouth of the Elk on the south bank of the Kanawha River in Charleston, West Virginia. Now the rat knew it well. In fact, the rat's own bloodline went back to colonial times, and the founding of Charleston was embedded deep in the rat family's collective memory. Despite the crude nom de guerre, the shithole was a very historic site. The rat's ancestors had been present when the Shawnee led the captive Mary Ingalls downriver to Kentucky during the French and Indian War. 20 years later, a young Simon Kenton would pass right by the spot where the boys were currently fishing. The Rodents family witnessed the groundbreaking of Clendenin's Fort in 1788, later known as Fort Lee, and the nucleus for the future city. Daniel Boone once lived upriver for a time. The great Indian sieges were known to the Rats family as well. The Ranger, Fleming Cobb, and Mad Ann Bailey had both saved Fort Lee by bringing in a fresh supply of powder and lead while being pursued by painted warriors. Cobb paddled to Fort Randolph on the Ohio and back in 14 hours, while Bailey rode on horseback to and from Fort Savannah in the Greenbrier country. Some of the rat's ancestors had been killed by the fort's cat while raiding a supply of parched corn. The rat also lost kin who had ventured up the hill to raid the stores at Fort Scammon, built by Union troops in 1863 to fortify the heights above the river overlooking the shithole. One thing the rat knew, as well as the history of Charleston, was that rats were despised by fishermen, and wisely he chose to return to the safety of his hole in the riverbank. A long rifle shot away from the site of the founding of Fort Lee nearly 200 years earlier, the boys were assembled across the river. All were bait fishing that evening and hoping for a big carp or channel cat. They had known each other since grade school and were able to fish with the easy familiarity only possible with close friends who were almost like family. Though not overly macho like most teenagers, they preyed on weakness. They never overlooked a chance to joke with or berate each other about everything from girls to setting a hook in a rotten log or snagging a line in a tree limb while casting. That evening, they had a metal bucket half filled with sand and kerosene. They had lit it up, and it was serving as a makeshift smudge pot, the black smoke wafting across the gritty riverbank as the wind dictated. With a sweating open tub of chicken livers on the sand by their feet and a cup of night crawlers resting on a flat rock, the boys had soiled their hands for the evening by baiting their hooks. The fronts of their t-shirts were stained from wiping the excess bait slime from their hands. They closely watched their rod tips for a strike. Occasionally, one of the rods would give a quick jerk followed by a slackening of the line. Other times, the jerk would be followed by a spastic shaking of the rod. In either case, the owner of the rod would fetch it from the old car seat, set the hook, and reel like hell. More often than not, the result was a good-sized carp or channel catfish. When a carp was brought in, some of the boys would hold it up by the gills and spit a foot-long dark stream of tobacco juice into the fish's mouth before returning it into the river. These boys were fairly ethical in their treatment of fish they caught. They would never intentionally hurt a fish, though they had witnessed some atrocities in their years at the shithole. They had seen carp mutilated and their guts used for bait that brought in huge catfish that were in turn taken home and eaten. At the time, the boys who witnessed this agreed that they were not hungry enough to fish in such a manner. Once a stranger was fishing down the bank and caught a large gar, which he threw back, only after jamming the fish's snout into a plastic bottle. The boys saw the bottle bob away with the poor gar swimming behind it in the current. The presence of such shady, unethical characters was simply a reality when fishing in the evening, especially at night. There is always an element of danger along any river. The boys, however, felt safe since they always fished as a group, and should such a person invade their fishing spot, they would just play it safe and placate the interloper until it was time to move on. They heard the dry sound of boots sliding on gravel, the sound of someone coming down the hill from McCorkle Avenue. The boys turned their heads and saw a man they had seen before. He was a thin, white-haired man of about 60 years of age. He always carried an ultralight rod and spinning reel. He was a dedicated angler and never fished with bait. The boys had seen him bring in little strippers on small, brightly colored spinners. They knew he was retired, and he went by the nickname Ski, an abbreviated version of his long Slavic name most found too difficult to pronounce. The boys considered him a wise old man, worthy of respect, and an all-around straight shooter. "Howdy, boys. Catch anything?" "Nothing yet, just a few hits," was the reply. Ski set up his rig and cast his line, slowly reeling in the spinner. "Well, I've seen a river once that was plumb full of fish, and you couldn't catch a one. Where at?" "In the Philippines. We could see all the fish in that river, and we couldn't get one to bite. So we threw in a few hand grenades, and that did the trick." "Hey, Ski, what was that you were telling us that time about the coconut moonshine?" "Oh, this fella rigged up a still out near the beach where there were a lot of coconuts, and he started making moonshine. Well, that was the rawest stuff you ever tasted. It just took a thimbleful, and you could feel it down to your toes. Anyway, one of the Marines wanted to try it, and we gave him a little shot. And he said he wanted a big drink because he was from Texas. Well, he took a big Texas-sized drink, and a few minutes later he was laying out on the beach right there in the sun, knocked his ass out." The boys loved the old man's stories and knew them all by heart. "What about the Harley?" "Oh, you mean the time we found that Harley Davidson with a sidecar? It was in a crate, and a buddy and I fixed it up. We took that thing out one time with me in the sidecar. I had a BAR, you know what that is." The boys nodded. "Well, we went down this road. Well, it was barely a road, and come around the bend, and the road was just full of Japs. He gunned that thing, and I let go with that BAR, and we just plowed right through 'em, turned around and gunned it right back." As Ski tilted his head back so he could see better through his glasses while reeling in a small striped bass, a siren from across the river caught his attention. They could see a thin man in an orange jumpsuit running across the Elk River Bridge perpendicular to where they were standing. "Must be a prison break," Ski said. "Must have broke out of the county lockup." "If I had that Jap rifle I brought back, I could nail that sumbitch right here." They strained their eyes to watch as the runner made it another 100 yards and faded from view before two squad cars with flashing blue lights zoomed over the bridge for a reunion which reacquainted him with the tender mercies of the justice system. What the hell's going on over there? The boys turned to see a stranger who had arrived unnoticed while their attention was focused on the prison break. "Some guy just broke out of jail and the cops just got him," one replied. The man was wearing a sleeveless t-shirt and appeared to be in his late 30s. In one hand, he held a rod and reel, pre-rigged for bottom fishing, and a small cup of night crawlers. He clutched a six-pack of beer in the other hand. He had no tackle box. On his arms were several ill-defined scrawlings in blue ink that most likely denoted earmarks of his past social life. He talked and lit a cigarette at the same time. The words and smoke came out of his mouth simultaneously. "You boys catching anything?" "Got some hits." He caught a couple of stripers. "I want to get me a damn catfish." Setting his rod against a rock, he opened a can of beer, drank half of it down, and intended to bait his hook. When the time came to select a night crawler and penetrate the black soil in which the worms were sold with his fingers, he hesitated. Turning to the closest boy, he said, "Hey, buddy, would you put that worm on that hook for me? I hate handling them slimy son of bitches." The teenager complied and helped the man out. They watched as he appeared to be able to cast reel, talk, drink, and smoke all at the same time. He did it all at once without appearing to be in any particular hurry. His slow cadence fit the pace and mood of the shithole, and he assumed his place among the brotherhood of shithole fishermen. Ski spoke to no one in particular as he cast and reeled. "Our anniversary's coming up next week. I've got to get my wife something special." "Well, I'm on my third wife, and she's a bitch," the beer drinker replied. "We've been married 40 years, and I'll tell you, sometimes I had to go out of town for weeks at a time for work, and when I got home, it was a honeymoon every time." "And God bless you, sir," said the beer drinker, raising his can. "You just got to work it out and keep at it. It takes a lifetime to make a marriage work." Just then the beer drinker's rod went off. The tip gyrated down and back up, pulling the top half of the rod into an arc that pointed to the river. Throwing aside the beer can, he grabbed the rod, set the hook, and began to reel. About 20 yards out, a huge white mass rolled on the surface. "That's a big damn carp," one of the boys cried out as they quickly reeled in their lines to avoid getting tangled with the carp. They set their rods aside and stood slightly behind him, the best vantage point to watch the action. The carp was a fighter and took out some drag. The beer drinker continued to pull back the rod and pump the reel. Then something happened that the boys had never seen before. Just as the beer drinker pulled the rod up nearly vertical with the tip bending forward, the rod came near enough to his face that the tip of his cigarette burned through the monofilament fishing line. The snap of the line was audible, not unlike someone stepping on a dry twig in the woods. The man fell backwards and was caught by two of the boys who had been watching. The line went slack and the carp was gone. A broken line was nothing new. It happened all the time. But they had never seen someone burn their own line with a cigarette before. They had seen it happen once with a Coleman lantern while night fishing, but that was different. A fish was not on the line. The man righted himself, threw down his rod in disgust, and let fly a stream of expletives that befitted the situation. After he calmed down with 2 more beers and a cigarette, the boys gave the beer drinker a hook and a sinker so he could fish again. They even baited his hook for him, but not entirely for charitable reasons. One of the boys casually asked, "Got an extra beer, buddy?" The beer drinker didn't even turn his head. His eyes focused on the water. He answered, "There ain't no such thing as an extra beer, buddy." The other boys laughed and filed the quick reply away for future use against would-be moochers. Shithole wisdom was always appreciated. Over the course of the next hour, the beer drinker caught his sought-after catfish, a good-sized channel cat. The boys ringed him round and held a flashlight as he removed the hook with a multi-tool from his belt. His aversion to night crawlers forgotten, he rebaited the hook and cast into the dark river. The catfish put him in a more jovial mood, and he began to explain his pedigree regarding catching catfish. I used to fish the old Lock 6 in South Charleston with my brother-in-law. Well, he was my second wife's brother, not the brother-in-law I got now. Anyway, we only fished for citation-sized flatheads. They got to be at least about 30 pounds or so before you get a citation from the DNR. Anyway, we had a hell of a rig for catching flatheads. You ever get a flathead? They're green, slimy, snot-colored bastards. I caught one once on chicken skin, said a voice from the dark riverbank. Chicken hide? I reckon you can get a small one on that kind of bait. We always used bluegills or small drums. We had a generator and we hooked up a big stand of fluorescent lights to fish by. We always took my nephew along. He was just a kid, and he caught the bait for us. Whatever he reeled in, we hooked up and cast it right back out, a quivering on the hook. I used a big old ocean rod with a bait caster reel, like in Jaws. Did you ever get any big ones? Yep, we got a whole bunch of them. Had a Polaroid camera and we got a picture of every one. I'd love to have that photo book, but my ex-brother-in-law's got it somewhere. We'd fish all night, sort of like coon hunting, only on the river. Yeah, I guess it was. We always had a fifth of whiskey and a 357, so we had all the angles covered. Nobody messed with us. The boys reeled in a few drum and small carp. During a lull in the action, one of them built a small fire using driftwood and garbage, for they planned on fishing on through the night. Waves began to roll in as a line of coal barges pushed by a tugboat slowly passed downriver. The lights of Charleston shone and reflected in long moving streams of color on the nighttime water. The beer drinker finished his beer and bid the fisherman good night, heading on home presumably to his third wife. Ski packed up and went home to his first wife. The boys baited another hook, not knowing yet what it was like to have a wife. The boys fished on and threw rocks at a rat they suddenly noticed sniffing the chicken livers, ignorant of the fact that in a few short years high school would end and their lives would change forever. Driftwood and garbage bonfires and all-night fishing marathons down at the shithole would soon become cherished memories, and their lives would move on as sure as the current of the Great Kanawha. Now that's story 1, y'all. All right, story number 2, you guys. Roller Girls at the Empty Glass. Now, the Capitol building of the state of West Virginia is among one of the nation's finest. Designed by famed architect Cass Gilbert along French Baroque and classical Romanesque lines, it was constructed in the depths of the Great Depression, during a time when a traditionally poor state was made even poorer by the harsh economic downturn that spiraled out of control following the crash of '29. It is perhaps a small miracle that such a grandiose structure was even considered by the state's leaders. While so many unemployed young men earned $1 a day building rustic cabins and stone walls under the direction of the Civilian Conservation Corps in one of over 50 CCC camps throughout the mountain state, other construction crews and craftsmen were adding the finishing touches to what would become a picturesque model of democratic government. Fine cut stone, adorned with regal Corinthian columns, supported an iconic cornice and pediment as pleasing to the eye as any true classical structure overseas. A majestic chandelier in the spacious rotunda of shining marble, highlighted with the finest cut glass crystals, loomed over the thousands of tourists who visited the building each year. Footsteps and voices echoed throughout the shining marble halls that reflected the images of whoever passed through the timeless corridors. It is rare to see someone walking quickly through this building, for their eyes are often transfixed on the beauty of the design and with the fine old world craftsmanship. The towering gold-leafed dome and spire, topped with a golden eagle, whose wings often catch the blaze of the sun, is the crowning touch to an architectural masterpiece. If the Capitol building houses the seat of government and the state's power platform, just blocks away downriver exists another sort of Capitol, On the corner of Washington and Elizabeth Streets exists the capital of West Virginia's artistic bohemian underground. Though not gilded with gold foil and marble, this building serves just as important a purpose to the city of Charleston and the state of West Virginia. Some would argue that this building serves a nobler purpose than the one served in the Capitol building, for in this building any money that might be wasted or time consumed or people screwed is never at the expense of the taxpayer. The empty glass is a true Charleston landmark. If yuppies and hipsters flock to microbreweries and guitar bars to drink and listen to music, the glass is where the musicians gather to drink and listen to music. It is the equivalent of an old coastal village that still has a true fisherman's wharf, where all of the real old salts dock their boats and congregate after a day at sea, isolating themselves from the tourists and wannabe sailors. After a gig, songwriters, guitar players, and full bands from venues all over the city can be seen lounging at a table with pitchers of beer or sitting at the bar hunched over a tall boy of PBR. Live entertainment of some sort is offered every night of the week. In the days before the county ordinance banned smoking in bars and restaurants, the glass was a dark, hazy den of smoky funk. Today, the air is clearer, but the message is the same. To cross its threshold is to enter into a cultural mosaic of ever-shifting patterns of light and dark, good and bad, soft and loud, genteel and wild, docile and crazy, all rolled into one big fat joint that could not be smoked in one sitting, but must be passed around the room and shared in common experience. It is a lava lamp of righteous living art and music that exists in the dark recesses of the artist's soul, a psychedelic kaleidoscope of people and music that blend together to form something greater than their individual parts. It is a Jackson Pollock work, painted in smoke, beer, blues, jazz, patchouli, oil, lilac vegetal, ringing amplifiers, tattoos, nose rings, dreadlocks, electric violins, banjos, Hammond organs, leather sandals, spiraling dancing hippie chicks, redneck shit kickers, and steel guitars. It is a lighthouse beacon that calls out to the soul of the artist after the sun goes down, when the muses whisper and beckon like sirens to a rocky shore. Over the years, the glass has become a popular gathering place not only for musicians, but also for people who feel a connection with the art and music community. The bar has been used for a wide range of special events, including fundraisers and even wedding receptions. Any individual or organization with a good cause knows that they can always find a generous, sympathetic reception at the glass. Thus, it was on one hot, sticky Saturday night in the dog days of a recent summer that the local roller girls chose the empty glass as the location for one of their famed after parties. Flat track roller derby had come to Charleston with the new millennium, adding a new nuance to the culture of the Kanawha Valley, as well as an opportunity for courageous women to experience the ultimate in female empowerment. What vocation other than roller derby enables women who work all week the chance to take out their angst and aggression not on the world, but on other women on a weekly basis? They are a sisterhood of stomp whose main goal is to get out on the track and hit a bitch. Broken bones, chipped teeth, bruises, stitches, and concussions are considered rites of passage. Their raw female beauty is often augmented and balanced by scars and patches of purple flesh. Needless to say, the roller girls play hard. They also party hard, and the glass is the perfect launching pad for their party rocket ship. To the roller derby novice, the sport takes some time to fully understand. In a nutshell, there are two teams which face off in what is called a bout. They score points by completing revolutions around a circular track and passing the players on the opposing team. It's sort of like NASCAR, only instead of smoking engines and hot rods zooming around the big ring, it's smoking hot bods zooming around in a ring, more like ASCAR. The chassis The chassis on these vehicles are tightly covered in hot pants and pleasantly gyrate as thighs are pumped and wheels skid into tight turns, sometimes ending in a sudden stop caused by a well-placed booty block or a violent hip check. The after party is a derby tradition hosted by the home team. Some after parties are family-friendly affairs held in the back rooms of nice little restaurants with children running around. These parties are generally quiet gatherings with less drinking, more spiritual bonding and licking of wounds, and appeal more to the motherly side of the roller girls. The glass after parties do not fit into this category. Babysitters are contacted weeks ahead of time when a glass party is on the calendar. All of the attitude, profanity, sweat, body odor, grit, and adrenaline of a bout are transported to the glass and are made manifest in jello shots and leg wrestling. On this night, the girls staggered into the glass in groups, some limping as their carpools arrived. The music thumped into the ears as if the bass amps were wired directly to one's temple. On the stage, the Renfields, out of Morgantown, played their brand of bluesy punk, their outrageous outfits resembling a college Halloween costume party. On the bar, the shots were lined up and slurped down as a dozen elbows jerked up in unison with the snap of heads, and the alcohol began its journey to fortify the bloodstream among screams and shouts that for a brief moment drowned out the music. Uninhibited partiers danced before the stage while the sound man roadblock ensured a good mix at his station behind the large soundboard in the back of the bar. Some couples danced facing each other in what resembled an ancient ritual of courtship. Others slowly shifted with a beer in their hand, lost in their own little world. In a society that increasingly is becoming ever more homogeneous and generic, roller girls are independent, one-of-a-kind nonconformists who blaze their own trails. This is evidenced by each girl's derby name, emblazoned on the back of their jerseys. Many are parodies of popular horror movie characters or action figures. Some intimate a slow death for their opponents or advertise sexual prowess. Though the bout was over and the drinking started, the competition was not over for the night. Another after-party tradition was in full swing for all to see on the dirty floor before the bar. The crowd formed a ragged ring, their heads tilted to the floor, each with an iPhone in hand snapping digital images as two half-drunk derby girls engaged in battle. Gunsy No Pants and Chieftain McManus, their right legs entangled below the knee, immodestly rolled around on the floor in a leg wrestling competition. Gunsy was called No Pants because she was never seen at a roller event wearing pants. She was always in panties and fishnets. She practiced in panties, bouted in panties, and partied in panties. The chieftain was the team captain and dressed with a Scottish theme that paid homage to her Scotch-Irish heritage, common in West Virginia. She had the Scottish flag on the seat of her hot pants and often wore a derby-styled kilt. She led her clan with all of the vehemence and wrath of a modern-day Boudica, the Celtic warrior chieftain of antiquity who fought the Romans. Her fiery red hair and green eyes reflected her Highland temperament on the flat track, as well as on the floor of the glass. In the soft light and shadows of the bar, she resembled a fuller-figured Louise Brooks, the ivory-skinned goddess of the silent screen. The roller girls grunted and screamed as they slammed each other around the floor, their strong muscles contracting. On each of their arms was a large number written in grease pencil to help identify them during the blur and heat of the bout. Each girl's arms were a smear of sweaty black grease as the numbers began to rub off on the floor and onto each other. Finally, Chieftain hauled off and whipped her badass roller thighs into gear and slammed Gunsy around, pinning her to the floor to gain victory. Eager hands reached down from the crowd to help each girl up and maybe get a sweaty, busty hug in return. The two teammates hugged each other in solidarity, drank down a shot that mysteriously appeared in their hands, and slapped each other on the rump for good luck before parting to find their bows. A roller girl walked over to the bar and, tightly cupping them in both hands, rubbed her substantial bosoms against the back of her man's neck as he sat drinking a beer looking up at the TV. The line in front of the restrooms continued to grow as word got out that the roller girl had passed out in the john. The smokers were congregated out in the alley along with non-smokers who wanted a brief rest from the loud music. Leg wrestling and dancing continued. The Derby girls screamed for another round of communal shots from the bar. All the while, the Renfields continued to provide a soundtrack for the surreal scene of earthy beauty that is a roller derby after party. Across town, the Golden Eagle, sitting on his perch atop the state capitol building, watched in silence the wonderful parade of characters who entered and exited the empty glass. Though proud of his station in life and what he represented to so many civic-minded citizens, there were times that he wished he was not so high and mighty and could oversee the city's other capitol building. That's story 2, y'all.